Hey everybody, I am TinTim, that is T-I-N as in ne'er-do-well, T-I-M as in Misha! XOXO Detox. I am America's first drag queen public intellectual, aka the Cornell motherfucking West of drag, coming to you each week with my thoughts on the most recent episode of RuPaul's Drag Race Season 5. This was a rough episode. Everyone has been wanting to talk about the issue between Roxxxy and Jinkx Monsoon and Roxxxy's treatment of Jinkx this episode, and I don't know that I have a whole lot to add to that conversation. I will say that it made me more uncomfortable, like almost physically uncomfortable, than almost any other conflict, maybe any other conflict that I remember seeing on Drag Race. And I think it's because it was clear that Roxxxy herself was very uncomfortable, like it was coming from this very emotional, kind of insecure, uncomfortable place. It wasn't like she was being reality television villain character, she was just being unpleasant. And it was like almost unpleasant even for her, right? The person that I was watching, I think, a lot more closely during that whole thing was actually Detox, because Detox's critique of Jinkx and Detox's reasoning about why Jinkx shouldn't be in the final three was a lot less kind of irrational and much more sort of based on an argument that she was making, so trying to understand what that argument was, that Jinkx got a lot more help than the other girls along the way, which, you know, we weren't there, so we don't know what kind of help she got. But what I would say is that just judging from Jinkx's progression over the course of this season, I don't feel like it's fair to say that she came in, like, not knowing how to do her face or not knowing how to do fashion. She had a particular way of doing it that worked for the kind of drag she did, that worked for her character, and like now in this venue is not, you know, displaying her to her best. On the elimination lunch on Logo's website, the Spreecast, Michelle Visage's response was, you know, I don't think it's fair to say that it was a school for girls, it was more like girlfriends or sisters helping each other out. It seems to me more like kind of a master class, and maybe she has this skill set the other girls don't have, and they have this skill set she doesn't have, and like how do we cross-fertilize? The other thing that I will say about Jinkx, now having seen her perform, she was here in Chicago a couple weeks ago and performed along with Detox, Roxxxy, and Alaska. Great show. The skills that she has as a stage performer, I think, are on an entirely different plane, different kind of level, different space than really any other girl that we've seen on Drag Race. You know, she is someone who is a professional level stage performer, I think could step on into, you know, the production of, you know, kind of any professional Broadway show tomorrow, I think, and fill those shoes. I think what she brings to the table is really extraordinary beyond even what television can capture. With Drag Race and this title of America's Next Drag Superstar, there's always a little bit of this tension between how much do we honor kind of people who are at the absolute top of their game in like this traditional craft of drag versus how much do we honor people who are performers in that idiom that also have that extra thing that comes either from another field or brings pieces together in a new way. You know, when it comes down to picking that person, that America's Next Drag Superstar person, I think that, you know, what that quality is that sets a superstar apart from others is something very, you know, difficult to put your finger on, something very intangible. But I will say that seeing Jinkx and the energy in the crowd during her performance, it was like very evident to me that this person has already been chosen by the fates or by the fans or whoever is already on that superstar track to an extent that it almost doesn't even matter who wins the show. Jinkx is sort of there already. Hey everybody, I just realized that I was not actually recording for the entire second half of my video, so I'm gonna attempt to recreate it as best as I can. The only other thing that I wanted to talk about this week was Alaska and Jinkx are both in the top 3, and I think, you know, way back, you know, months ago when we were seeing the cast list get released, I think that there were a lot of us who didn't necessarily expect that. We were like, oh, these people both seem like extraordinary characters and really great, but just judging by the way that sort of character queens and kind of camp humor queens have done on the show in the past, we didn't necessarily expect them to go very far. While I think that the whole thing about Rue only liking quote-unquote fishy sort of glamour girls isn't actually accurate, I think that, you know, the oddballs, the weirdos, the freak queens, the gender fuckers, some of the transgressive artists have actually done really well in the show, whether that's Sharon, Raja, Angina, Nina. You know, those more traditional sort of theater girl camp queens haven't done so well. You know, the Pandoras, the Mimi I'm Firsts. You know, I've also heard that Rue is not the biggest fan of theater or musical theater in general, which I actually think was sort of telling in that regard. But Jinkx and Alaska, who do have some of that kind of camp humor and sensibility, have ended up doing really well. And this has sort of been like the season of the theater girls and the acting girls in a way. When everyone started out calling it like the season of the fish, I don't know that we all saw coming. So I've been kind of reflecting on and asking myself, what is it about these two that has set them apart from those earlier girls? And I think part of what it is, or this is my theory anyway, and see if you all agree. I don't know if anyone read the recent article about RuPaul and Spin, but they were really emphasizing Rue's sort of own genderfuck roots and Rue's sort of punk roots and how much that punk piece has been a part of who Rue is, and she really came from that kind of transgressive underground and came from that and sort of self-consciously decided, okay, how am I going to become something that can have this much broader appeal? And I think that she has retained an appreciation of that sort of punk sensibility. And I think that part of what Jinkx and Alaska have, that some of those other theater girls like Pandora and Mimi don't have as much, is that kind of punk transgressive edge. You know, Alaska obviously with the association with the House of Hunt and Sharon and that kind of trash glam, gutter glam thing she does. And then I think Jinkx too has talked about, you know, being really influenced by that type of underground drag, transgressive drag as well, and that seems like a big scene in Seattle. I think that's all I have for you tonight, so sorry for the little technical malfunction, but we're getting down to the end here, so can't wait to see how it all turns out. Much love to you all. Mwah.